The Brent Thompson Radio Show tonight from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. 126 Williman Street is the location. And for the next hour, we will talk Citadel football with the head coach, Brent Thompson. Here we go. First segment, we'll get into several different items, and we've got a lot of things to touch on in tonight's broadcast. Coach, as always, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's been a beautiful day out here. We've got a couple of good days of practice out there, so I can't complain.
I will tell you that the show tonight is outside, and we are operating on the outdoor stage, which is a new venue for us, but it is one where I'm sure folks are going to be able to hear exactly what Coach and I are talking about tonight. We thank all of you for being with us tonight that have come out to specifically watch the show, and we're excited about what's to come in the next hour. We will get into the meat of the content in the coming segments, Coach, but I will tell you that, from a recap perspective, I had a chance to listen in to what you said yesterday during your press conference. You might have to answer a few of those types of questions again in tonight's broadcast. But just reflections, if you will. You had a pretty long bus ride to get back from Birmingham. I passed all of the buses on my way back, and I was thinking about what you guys were stewing over there. So talk about the recap, if you will, in your own mind, how you kind of were processing things once the game was over, once you jumped on that bus and started heading back in this direction.
You know, Mike, when you have a game like that and you have a performance like that, you start to think about and you start to question everything that you've done the previous week, maybe the previous 2 weeks. It's a long bus ride home. I had the opportunity, which is nice, to be able to watch both sides of the film as well as the special teams. We were able to find out exactly what, where do we want to go from there. So it was on that bus ride that I actually was able to, kind of put a plan together. I put a plan together as far as what I was going to say to the team the next day, how I wanted to approach this week. And, we're going to have the whole team together, not just the travel team. What I wanted to say to the staff the next morning, exactly lay it all out. Because when I do that, I get a little bit better sleep at night when I've got an idea of what I want to do. Otherwise, I'll start thinking about things throughout the night. So it was a tough, long trip home, but it actually gave me a good opportunity to be able to think about what I needed to say.
Now, something you said was interesting to me because you talked about how the video was broken down in terms of being able to watch the entire game. So how long does it take when everything is taken out of it, timeouts, dead balls, things like that? What does it take for you to listen or to watch a entire football game? That's probably not a very long process when it comes to all those edits and stuff.
Well, when you rewind it quite a bit, it takes me about typically between about 2 hours each side of the ball. So it would take me about good 4 hours to get through it. Special teams wise is a little bit shorter, probably only about half an hour, 45 minutes or so. So to get through the whole game, it'll probably take you about 4.5, 5 hours or so. Once you rewind and you go back, I'm a little bit faster through the defensive side. I'm just looking for effort to the ball on defense, major mistakes there. Coach Harrell's got a better idea of what the scheme looks like. I tend to watch their offense more than anything when I'm watching their defense, when I'm watching our own defense there to figure out how they're taking advantage of us and what was the offensive coordinator seeing in those particular calls. Special teams-wise, I thought we were pretty sound. I thought that was probably the highlight of the day. We had a pretty uneventful special teams. Offensively, unfortunately, we had also uneventful offense, too, at the time. So we just got to do a better job and figure out what we want to do a little bit earlier and have a better idea with it.
Now, when you go on the road, you have 3 buses, right?
Correct.
Who is on which bus?
We usually typically have bus 3 as administrators. It's also our specialist, and it's also our wide receiver group. Bus 2 is the defensive group. It used to be the offensive group, but when I became the head coach, we kind of flipped bus 1 to the offensive one, and that's kind of how it went. It's complete defense on bus 2, and then offense is all on bus 1.
So which one do you ride on?
I ride bus 1.
Gotcha. Now, do you have an opportunity, once you've watched some film, do you have an opportunity to have players come up and discuss certain things? Is that part of the rewind process? Do you actually say, hey, bring such and such up to the front of the bus here? I kind of want to address a couple of things while they're fresh in my mind.
Well, if I did that, I have to wake them all up because every single trip they're all out. So no, I try to leave them alone. I try to make sure that they get their rest too. I don't think that's a good time to be able to address those points. I think I need probably a night to sleep on most of them.
Give it a little bit of time to be thinking about what's going on where that is concerned. Well, we have plenty of time in the show today to talk about what went down at Samford, and so we do want to get some recapping in on that particular game, what Coach saw, what Coach addressed, all of those sorts of things. And so let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our first commercial break of the show, and we will come right back and dive right in as the Citadel Bulldogs are home for 2 consecutive ball games starting this week. A 2 o'clock ball game against the Mercer Bears, followed by a 6 o'clock ball game against the Wofford Terriers. And so Coach and I will dig into the Mercer Bears a little later on in the program, but we'll recap Samford in a bit more detail when we come back in just a couple of moments. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
When you're feeling hungry, you don't want to mess around with a quarter-pound meat sandwich. Instead, eat the new half-pound roast beef sandwiches. 8 ounces of thinly sliced, tender roast beef. And if you really want a quarter pound of beef, that's cool. Just eat half of one of these. Arby's, we have the meats.
Style. Selection. Service. Quality. Value. See what everyone is talking about. Ashley Furniture Home Store.
How do we make sure there's toppings in each bite of Papa John's pizza? We check 80,000 times a year. Now get an extra large 2-topping pizza for just $11. Everyone's doing their part to make your game day better.
Dad, grab something good. No junk food, please.
Go for the Trumu! It's delicious!
That's chocolate.
But it's nutritious and contains no artificial growth hormones.
Trumu, a truly good thing anytime.
There we go. Welcome back to Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue, downtown, 126 Williman Street, where the Citadel Bulldogs Coaches Show is happening tonight between 7 and 8 o'clock with their head coach, Brent Thompson, alongside. I'm your host, Mike Legg. Thank you very much for being with us tonight as we settle in to talk about all of the things that happened last week where the Citadel Bulldogs were concerned. So let's talk about leading up to this game, Coach, because you knew this one was going to be a tough one. 2 years ago, you knew you were kind of going into a hostile environment against a team that puts a lot of kids in the National Football League. This is a team that will tend to have some NFL quality type of athletes there. How they do year to year can vary, but leading up to this one, how did you kind of feel going into this game in Birmingham?
Well, I felt good about where we were. First of all, is we had 2 pretty solid weeks of practice. We had the bye week that we kind of got a few days worth of work in there. But really, to be honest with you, I thought we would be a lot more prepared or better ready to play there. And they do. They've always got good players. We know we've got to bring our game, but we've typically performed well over the past couple of years against them. So that was a little bit surprising to me, and no matter whether we're at home or on the road, that really shouldn't matter to our players. It's a game that they're going to kick it off, and we've got to rise to the occasion.
What do you do week in and week out? Obviously, you talked about, being on the bus. You've thought about the things that you want to say to your players. You talk about the things that you're going to address the guys with. How do you go about the whole discussion of you're the defending champs, everybody's got you circled on their calendar, and even though we may not be able to simulate it week to week, think about how we just worked in practice this week. and then ratchet it up a little bit. You can't necessarily simulate it, but you're going to get everybody's best effort. How do you address that?
That was probably our wake-up call that week, and that was probably the first time that a team has really gotten after us really good. And it was one of those, we needed that more than anything, because you can talk about it, you can try to simulate it all you want, you can tell everybody about it, but when you're not used to it, and something like that happens, it wakes you up in a hurry, and we certainly got woken up in a hurry, especially in the first quarter.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that particular game. We'll gloss over some of the highlights of the game there as things got started in the first quarter. The Samford Bulldogs get the football at the 25. First of all, you deferred until the second half. Talk to me about philosophy on coin toss. Do you always go a particular direction with the coin toss whenever you're losing?
Typically, we would like to defer if we lose the toss. Obviously, if we lose the toss, we take the ball. But typically, we usually try to get defense first to take the position out of it. We've got a great defense. I think they do a great job. So if we can pin them deep, we usually try to.
So it's not necessarily about, this team's really good offensively, we're really good offensively against this particular defense. It's kind of just, this is what we tend to do when we win the toss.
I usually like to have the first crack at the, halftime adjustments. I really like the ball in the second half. I'd rather gain my extra possession if I can in the second half. Because I feel like in the first half, if you take the football right there, you're still trying to figure out what the defense is doing. You're still trying to figure out, what's working here. So I usually like to get the first crack at the adjustments.
The Samford Bulldogs get the ball first at the 25-yard line. 4 plays. Only took about a minute. They hit you for a big play or two. And before you know it, a minute into the ball game, they've got an 8-yard touchdown pass from Hodges to Kelvin McKnight, and they're out in front of you 7-0.
Yeah, they come out and they run the ball, and they kind of set it up a little bit, and then they come back and they run the flea flicker, and that kind of got all the way down there. And, it was a little bit of a punch in the face right there, right off the bat, and we had to wake up a little bit, and unfortunately we didn't wake up for a few possessions, but lesson learned.
Devlin Hodges, tell me what you think of this young man. Does he have the potential to, be a Peyton Award type candidate? Does he have an ability to play at the next level, perhaps?
I think he's a very good FCS player. There's no doubt about it. Once you get in the NFL, it's a different ball game, but he's got all the different passes. He's got a lot of savvy about him. I saw him make an underhand sidearm throw underneath a guy. I mean, he just kind of knows where all of his guys are, and I'm sure he's made that pass 100 times in practice. When you practice it all the time, I mean, he is on the mark, on the money. He threw a couple of really nice deep balls. Whether he's an NFL caliber player, I don't know yet. But to be honest with you, he's a great FCS player, and I do know that.
You did talk about how they jumped out. It took you a few possessions. They were able to hit on a long touchdown pass to make it 14-0. All in all, in the first 19 minutes and 21 seconds is when they had all their points by.
Yeah, they did, and it was no help of the offense either. Here we are offensively going 3 and out, getting a penalty, getting behind the chains, digging ourselves out of our own territory, which is it's very difficult for us. We had a 1st and 25 at one time. We had a negative yardage play. It seemed like any time that we had a positive yardage play, we had a negative yardage play to follow it, whether it was a penalty or whether it was just we took a loss someplace. And that really, and handed to them, is they came out and played physical, and they did what they had to do on defense to be able to stop us.
How would you describe what you were like on the sidelines? Were you angry? Were you disappointed? Were you even keeled? Describe your emotions on the sideline.
Well, I was even keeled for the most part. We'd been down before. I wasn't concerned about it. By the time we got 35 down, I started to get a little bit annoyed. More than anything is that we just couldn't move the ball, and we had to keep our defense off the field. We couldn't keep the defense off the field. We weren't we sat back so much on defense. We sat back so much on offense. We couldn't establish the fullback all day. It was just one of those days for us that you dread as a coach.
Coming out of the Samford game, healthy bunch? Are you guys okay?
Yeah, I don't think we hit anybody hard enough to get hurt.
All right, fair enough. We're going to get into several other things here. Now, I will mention that in the ball game, take it into the second half here. You guys in the second quarter, you got on the board, made it 35-7. That was at the point where Jordan comes into the game. You've told me before that it's more about feel than it is like a designed. Okay, on the 8th series of the ball game, he's going to come in. Same situation late in the second quarter at Samford?
Yeah, same exact situation. As I just play it by feel. Is one particular guy, given different situations, and it just happened to be one of those days. It was Jordan. Happened to go in there. If you paint yourself into a corner, you tell a young man that you're going to put him in on this particular play. It may not be too advantageous for him. I mean, you could put a fresh new quarterback in there on the second or third series, and you could be backed up inside the 10. That's not fair to him. Well, conversely, as Jordan happened to go in there when we were inside the 5, so he had a great opportunity to go in there, and he scored the first touchdown due to Kali's terrific interception return.
That was good. The Hodges threw the interception to Kali. You also got one later in the game with Span, and that leads me to turnovers here. In your first 4 games of the season, you have 7 interceptions, and you have a +5 turnover margin on the season. So that is those numbers clicking pretty well for you right now.
Yeah, we feel good about that. It's one thing that we always preach. We can't afford to turn the ball over, and if we continue to do that, we'll win more games than we lose. That's for sure.
So the Citadel Bulldogs come away from this one as we get into the second half. You were in a position once we got into the third quarter where you put another touchdown on the board. It came with 8:41 to go in the third quarter on an 8-yard run by Brandon Rainey. Talk about what you did with the B-backs on that day, because you've had 3 different guys that you've used in your first 4 ball games. So evaluate that position for me, will you?
Well, I thought both B-backs played fairly well. We played Lorenzo Ward and we played Brandon Rainey, of course. Both of them were seeing the field fairly well. The fullback play I thought was fairly good for the day for where everybody else was at. We were able to get some yards in there in the second half. We made a couple of adjustments, talked about what we wanted to run, and we take that drive. We take the opening drive of the second half after the deferment on the first half, and we take it down and we score, which was good. I mean, we're back in the ball game right there, and we've got an opportunity, and we feel like this is about where we were. I mean, the same thing happened at ETSU. We can climb back into this thing, get a few stops on defense. It's still early in the game.
That was a very Citadel-like drive, 12 plays, 78 yards, 6 minutes, 13 seconds. We've seen that a lot in other games.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we talk about. It's what we want to be about. And when you can do that and you can take time off the clock and you can frustrate some offenses, you got a chance. And we had some more opportunities throughout the game, and it was just unfortunate that we couldn't put it in the box.
Fourth down plays, particularly, had a couple of opportunities inside. I'm sure while you're riding back on the bus, you're thinking, well, if it had been 35-28, we get those 2, maybe could be a totally different ball game.
Yeah, I think we were 2 of 5 inside the red zone. I mean, you convert on all of them, and you're back in the ball game. You've got it tied up. Unfortunately, what was happening was kind of what I was alluding to before, and that was positive play, negative play. We get all the way down there. We get inside the 5. We got to go backward. We have 2 false starts inside the 5-yard line, which just absolutely kills us. It ends up with a 4th and 7, and it ends up with another 4th and 6 from the goal line or so, and that's with goal to go. And those are two tough gets for us, especially when you get all the way down there. The 4th and 6 on the last one was extremely difficult.
Ends up a 35-14 final score, and the Citadel Bulldogs are going to get to come home for 2 consecutive ball games after that one went down. In that one. We have a few other things to kind of wrap up that particular aspect of it. A couple of questions for Coach about wrapping up the Samford game, and then we'll move on to what is going on next. It's Parents' Day this weekend. The Citadel Bulldogs are at home for a 2 o'clock ball game. We'll talk about the polls and all of those things when Coach and I come back to Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Williman Street. We're on the outside stage today, so the breeze is working for us out here. Coach and I back in a minute on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human. Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter. He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank. Bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
We do great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
Back at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Williman Street for the Brent Thompson Radio Show. Good evening. We're here until 8 o'clock tonight to talk about the Citadel Bulldogs, and we're wrapping up discussion about the game at Samford from the weekend, and now it's on to the Mercer Bears for Parents' Day this coming weekend. Question about this, and I should have asked you about this in the postgame show, Coach, and forgot to do so, strangely enough, but I was going to ask you about the second half and the decision as it was, or as it turned out, I guess, hindsight, that Black goes the entire way in the second half. Did you feel like, I guess, once you had gotten to a certain point in the end of the second quarter, you're going into the third quarter, did you feel like that Jordan gave you the best opportunity to mount a comeback in the way that maybe you would have to play offensively? Did you feel like Dominique wasn't necessarily doing certain things in a certain way? What kind of decision-making thoughts were you having about the quarterback position?
Well, first of all, it was who was moving the football, who was able to move the offense a little bit. And it was like 3 weeks ago, or about 3 weeks ago when we played ETSU, and I shuffled them back and forth in there, and then finally I decided, hey, Dom's going to give us the best opportunity here. Jordan certainly didn't do anything wrong, but it was one of those days. I just kind of felt it with Dom. Well, the same thing happened just in reverse. Is neither one of them were doing anything wrong or anything just spectacular, but Jordan seemed to have a feel for it. He was able to, hit a couple seams there and got us a few yards. And really it was the first drive of the second half that kind of, I just said, we've got a chance to move the ball with him in there, so we just kept him in there. And, certainly it was just one of those things that, once again, you just play the hot hand.
I know that in your press conference yesterday, you talked about your decision going forward, and that would be that Dominique Allen would continue to be your starter. How much did you think about that over the weekend? Did you give that a lot of thought? Did you ever consider that you might want to go a different direction, change of pace? How much did you think about that over the weekend?
I thought about it really just on the trip home just a little bit, and I watched the game, and you don't want to make any decisions. And I told the players this, and I told the press this yesterday, is you don't want to hit any panic buttons. Here you are. You've got a player that's been your quarterback for 3 years, his third year now. He's won you 2 championships. He's won a bunch of games in his career there. And just because, and like I said, he wasn't doing anything wrong, but just because he didn't finish that game, they said, you know what? He's the leader of this offense. He's the leader of this football team. It's my job to get him and get him going on the right track again, and let's get going. And I pulled him in my office on Sunday, and I said, hey, you need to get going. This is your team. Let's go. And he was all about it, and it was awesome. He's been great ever since.
He seems like the guy that would benefit from that knowledge, given and maybe, you would know him better than anybody else would because you talk to him all the time. Not that he's shy from competition or anything like that. Obviously, he's a very intense competitor. But do you feel like him knowing that when you told him was important for him going forward?
I think so. It's he and I have been very, very close. He was, of course, he was my quarterback when I was his position coach and the coordinator. So I feel like I've been able to have some really good straight-up conversations with him. I also know his personality, and I can see things, and I can read him pretty well. And I thought that was exactly what he needed. I think that's exactly what this team needs. And to be honest with you, he should probably go down in history as one of the best quarterbacks in Citadel history. Let's face it.
He has done some very, very good things, and a lot of season obviously left here. We all do, whether it's media, fans, whatever the case may be, do things in a scrutinizing way and look at things in a scrutinizing way. One thing I wanted to ask you about, going into the ball game, you were 61% on third down. It was not as good, obviously, at Samford, and that made me think I think 61% probably is performing above maybe a goal that you would set. Do you have a goal for third down? Do you want to be at 50, 49%? What is that number?
If you're above 45%, you're probably top you're at least top 10, top 15 in the country. You know, we were extremely high right there, but of course you have a humbling experience like you did on Saturday. But that had really nothing to do with third down. It had probably more to do with first and second down.
I was going to say, did first and second down cause third down to be a little bit more of a problem? 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, too many 3rd and 8s.
Yeah, even 3rd and 4s and 3rd and 5s became very, very long for us. Even when we had 2 downs, we just weren't matching intensity out there with, especially that's what it comes down to on 3rd down. Sometimes you got to grind it out and have some grit about you.
Are there other things from an offensive perspective that you do that are goal-oriented? Do you have a goal for what you want to try to do on first down? Do you have other offensive numbers that maybe help you try to keep on track?
You know, typically we always want to get 4 yards on first down and 4 yards on second down and make it very easy for 3rd and short, and then you have set up opportunities to go for it on 4th down. And the problem is as a play caller, you always have to have your 3rd and what's your 3rd and medium, what's your 3rd and long call, and hopefully you don't have to have too many of those. But you want to make sure that you get a drive off pretty well, so you start your 1st and 10s on a 1st and 10 drive because you don't want to go 3 and out. So you really try to get at least 6 yards on that one as best you can. So, you've got a set of goals in mind as a play caller that you want to call, and you always have the next play that you want to go to. It's either a setup play or it's the payoff play, or it is the, hey, get the first down kind of play, or it is the, hey, I've got 2 more downs to get the first down. Now, for us, it's always about getting the first down. We don't look anything beyond the first down. We're okay. We feel we can execute a 14-play drive, and we've executed a 19-play drive.
That 19-play drive will go down in history. That one made me pretty tired that day. That was incredible.
If you're tired, how about those guys out there, man? They were exhausted.
I'm sure that's the case. That was like a 9-minute drive, wasn't it?
Impressive.
That was extremely impressive.
Proud of that one.
3-1 is the record now, 1-1 in the Southern Conference, which has the Bulldogs in a 3rd-place tie. We'll talk about the league and what everybody else is doing in the league a little later on in the show. As far as polls go this week, the Citadel is at number 17 in both polls, both the FCS Coaches Poll and the Stats FCS Poll. Samford is 20 in both polls. Wofford is 5 in both polls. And in the Stats FCS Poll, opposite the Coaches Poll, Western Carolina is sitting at number 22. So right now, 4 teams in various polls in the top 25. That from a team that got 4 teams in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, pretty impressive for the Southern Conference. The team that is probably most impressive is Western, playing extremely well on offense.
This is always a team, and I remember talking with Coach Houston about how I think he felt like he learned a lesson from Western Carolina, mainly because that was somewhat, I guess, early in the tenure, but that their team speed showed you guys what you kind of needed to be from a team speed perspective.
Yeah, that was the day that we kind of felt like we got out-athleted a little bit up there that year. We moved the ball offensively. We couldn't put it in the end zone once again. But as they put us in space on defense, and they were able to get the ball in space on defense on our defense, and it became very difficult for us that day.
They did not have a very good year last year. Do you have any indications as to why they're performing so well?
Well, they lost a quarterback, and then they were breaking in a true freshman quarterback there, and that tends to happen.
So that was the Adams kid. Now he's got a little bit more experience under his belt. We're going to take a time out on the show here. When we come back, we'll start turning our attention to the Mercer Bears. Coach and I are at the Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue location downtown, which is 126 Williman Street. I will say this, and this has gotten out there just a little bit, but we will continue to talk about this, is that if you are a Citadel cadet or you know a Citadel cadet, they have some general leave on Wednesdays, and therefore this is a perfect spot for them to come. And the folks at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue are going to make it worth their while on Wednesdays when this show is scheduled, which is from now until November the 8th, from 6 p.m. until close, and it's a dine-in only deal. Citadel cadets get 50% off the wings here at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue. It's a heck of a deal. We hope you'll take advantage of it and come out and see us each and every week and get away a little bit and come to Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. 126 Williman Street is the location. Coach and I come back and start talking about the opponent for this week and Parents' Day and a few other things. The Mercer Bears are in town. It's a 2 o'clock ball game on Saturday. And this is the Coach Brent Thompson radio show from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
Sorry, Dad.
Sure, you could get him a new car. You could also light a pile of money on fire. Because as long as Mr. It wasn't my fault takes the wheel on occasion, maintaining this car is your best option. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how.
Dad, where are you going?
Buying a home is a big financial decision, so you need a strong team working on your mortgage. That team is at South Atlantic Bank. Decisions are made right here in our community by mortgage professionals who really know the Low Country. South Atlantic Bank offers competitive rates and terms on loans for home purchase or refinance. If you need a mortgage loan, you need the mortgage loan professionals at South Atlantic Bank. South Atlantic Bank Mortgage Group, providing the keys to home ownership.
Welcome back, Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Willamette Street. This is the Brent Thompson Radio Show, live and on the outdoor stage. First time for this particular location. I know what musical acts feel like now, because I know there are people out there, but you can't necessarily see them. So you're just singing or talking, Coach, to people whose faces you can't necessarily recognize. And I know we have a lot of Citadel folks that have come out to watch today's show, and we appreciate that very much. But I see what it's like now, looking up into the lights.
Well, Mike,
Showbiz.
I always wondered why they always wear sunglasses on stage. I got to bring my sunglasses for next week, I guess.
That's true. The lights are a little bit bright here, but you can see what's going on. This is a great location, though. The weather's starting to break off and get a little bit cooler, although I think you probably, given a normal circumstance, you kind of like it to be a little bit warmer. It might be 82 at kickoff for you this weekend. Maybe you'd like a 6 or 8 more degrees for Mercer coming in.
As long as we got a little bit of humidity, I think we're in great shape. I love the heat. I think our players perform extremely well. It's a tough place to play down here in the heat when you're not used to it. Now, Macon, Georgia is probably pretty hot itself, but typically, yeah, we do prefer it hot, especially with a 2 o'clock kickoff. You got a chance for it to be a little warm.
Playing at home, you haven't had that luxury since week number 1. That's September the 2nd, so you've been over a month since the last time you played on your home field.
Yeah, we did the math. It's 35 days, and I've been telling the players that 35 days is a long day, and it's a long time not to play at home. Having 3 road games, and then, of course, having a bye week in between there, that can be it can be taxing on you. And more than anything, I think it's taxing on our travel team players, but it's really taxing on our taxi squad, our scout team guys. They don't get an opportunity to dress for a home game for 35 days. That can be very tough, and you're out there practicing every single day.
How many guys, or does it change on a week-to-week basis? How many guys do you choose to take on the road when you play on the road?
We typically take about 60, 62, 64, somewhere in there.
And it's not something you have to do. I mean, there's no league rule or anything that says you have to take a certain number of guys.
No, typically we take the 2 deep, we take our specialists, and then we take a couple of add-on guys that maybe they're special teams players. Maybe some of them are upperclassmen. Some of those guys do a great job for us on the scout team.
Use it as an opportunity to reward some guys, perhaps.
Absolutely. It's always nice to take some of those guys with us, especially they've been around on the travel team for about 2 or 3 years. That can be a lot.
We're going to dig into Mercer coming up here in just a second, but I did mention something to Coach during the break here, is that you know the program is in a good place when this is the first radio show tonight. This is the first time that Coach has done a show after a loss. This is I like it better the other way. I'll go ahead and throw that out there, don't you? I mean,
oh, hey, if I have my choice, man, I'll have it the other way every time. The press conference yesterday was probably my most difficult moment. Just having to sit there and answer questions about the game and relive it. As I told the media yesterday, is I put it away on Sunday, but then I got to bring it back out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and that can be challenging.
I may even ask you a question or two before the week is out, but at the same time, I understand where you're at, and you do have a rule. You do have to kind of put it behind you, and you had you took full advantage of that bus ride back and had a chance to review the sorts of things that you wanted to review and moving past it. We'll move forward to Mercer a little bit here. I'll ask you just a point-blank question off the top here. In 3 years, the games have been decided with Mercer by a total of 5 points. Why has Mercer been so tricky?
Well, first of all, I think they're very physical on defense. They're very ball control oriented on offense. Coach Lamb and the offense, they do a good job of trying to run the football. They do a good job of trying to take care of the ball, doing a good job of not turning it over. They don't throw many interceptions. He knows he's very, very savvy. He's very smart with his play calling. He knows when he needs to get his defense off the field. He knows when he keep them off the field. And he's got some wrinkles in his offense every single week. Defensively, I think they play extremely physical. They're pretty good against the rush, which will be challenging for us. And they play fairly fast. And I think all those things put together, they're a very talented unit. It's always a challenge for us to go and play these guys.
Some coaches come from a defensive background, some from an offensive background. So when you're at league meetings and coaches meetings and stuff like that, are guys like Bobby Lamb the guys you hang out with the most?
No, typically I don't hang out with too many of those guys very often. I probably gravitate more to Coach Ayers, the running guys, the option kind of guys. Although Coach Hatcher and I have had a couple of good conversations. We sat next to each other. Coach Lamb and I sat next to each other at the summer meetings. But, yeah, it's Coach Ayers and I that kind of get there, and we talk a little bit of option ball and old school option ball, really.
He just won his 200th game. That's a big deal.
That's amazing right there. To be able to survive in this business for that long and be that successful, extremely impressive.
Yeah, that is somebody you'll encounter soon enough. We'll move past that one just a little bit. Mercer is in a circumstance where they went – now, you recently had ETSU, and you played a team that had been without a football program for a while. But when Mercer brought it back, I mean – it had been gone for an extremely, extremely long period of time. Now, they are back and have their program ramping up. But they did not have a football team from 1942 to 2012. Imagine and talk about, if you will, what it must have been like for a guy like Bobby Lamb to take on that type of project to start a program from scratch. I mean, you don't even have anything left after that many years. I mean, you're talking 70 years between the time you last had a football program.
Well, Coach Lamb had a lot of things going for him. He had been a head coach for many, many years. He had been a head coach in the Southern Conference. When Mercer originally started their program, they were in the Pioneer Football League. So he had known what it was like to take a team into a scholarship program, what everybody was doing in the Southern Conference. So if they had early visions of getting into the Southern Conference, I think they chose the right guy. They also chose the right guy because he had extensive knowledge of what it took to win at the FCS level, and he had done a good job of it at Furman. And was really an easy choice for him. He's a Georgia guy. He's got a lot of connections there. His brother's a head coach in the state. His dad is from the state. I believe he's into coaching as well. So he's deep-rooted in that Georgia area. I thought that was an easy decision for Mercer. What I think the decision on Coach Lamb's part was, okay, how committed are you? What's the situation? What are we building facility-wise? What are you going to allow me to do? How am I going to get these guys in academically? Where do I recruit, which was pretty easy in Georgia. You've got your pick. The nice part about Macon is you can go down south in South Georgia and pick up some really quality football players. It's hard to recruit South Georgia because it's spread out. Not a lot of people go down there. And then you could still steal some from Atlanta. There's plenty of people that fly into Atlanta and recruit Atlanta, but yet when you can get there on a weekly basis when other people can't, Atlanta's a hotbed for recruiting, and we try to steal as much as we can out of that area. So I thought that was a great decision on both parts. He's done a tremendous job with this program, and I've said this since probably I got the head job here, and that's a program that really is on the rise. And pretty soon, I wouldn't be surprised if they won the conference.
Now, something you just said made me think of a question, and it had to do with recruiting and hotbeds for recruiting. I'm sure that over the years, that can change. What states have great players, what states everybody kind of wants to be in. What are kind of the hotbeds now where some of the best players are coming from a state perspective?
I would say the top 4 or 5 states, in probably no particular order, but you're always going to have your best probably NFL and Division I prospects in Florida. You're going to have probably the next is going to come Texas, of course. Such a large state, such a committed state to football. They do such a great job down there, and that's why we go down there and recruit. California, believe it or not, is probably the next best one. It's another large state. They've got a great commitment to football. And then I would say Georgia. Georgia would be your next hotbed at that point. And really, you can go anywhere from Alabama, Mississippi. Some of those per capita probably have some of the best football players. They do such a good job. There's such an emphasis on it. What you find in a lot of these southern states is they play football and they train all year round. There's portions of their day that are dedicated to lifting. There's portions of their day that are dedicated to football throughout their classroom. So they've dedicated themselves to being good at football and really preparing their players.
In my notes from last year's game against Mercer, I noticed I had kept track of the progression of the scholarships. You mentioned having played in the Pioneer League. That is a non-scholarship league. My notes from last year indicated that last year was the year when they were aiming to be fully funded from a scholarship perspective. Do you think that's where they are right now? Have you heard?
I would say so, yeah. I would say they're pretty close right now. Typically, we're all right around the high 50s to low 60s. We usually don't max them all out at 63 because things do happen, and you don't want to go over that number, otherwise you commit a violation there. But, you talk to Coach Wackenheim, I think he's in the high 50s up there at VMI, and then probably some of your other leagues are the other teams in the league are right around 62, 63, somewhere in there.
Mercer is the opponent for the Citadel Bulldogs this weekend. It's a 2 o'clock ball game at Johnson Haygood Stadium. Let's talk about the festivities. I know that you want to focus on the game, but there are things going on. Parents' Day, for example. Your players are going to be pulled in different directions. Some of your younger players have gone a while without seeing mom and dad, and this may be their opportunity. What's this weekend like?
Well, it's challenging from a lot of different angles, as we've got ring weekend for our, and it's very, very important to our 4th years. It's a terrific opportunity for them to finally reap the rewards of being at the Citadel and everything that they've put into it. It's one of those things that they look forward to ever since they were knobs. So you don't want to take that away from them. So we got to schedule around the ceremony on Friday. And then, of course, you do have Parents' Weekend. We try to leave everything really with our travel party for after the game, for after Saturday. It's a 2 o'clock kick, so you have a little bit more time after the game. We still try to keep a typical day and a typical Friday for the rest of our players that aren't involved in the ring ceremony throughout Friday afternoon and Friday evening.
Guys who are 4th-year guys who are getting their Citadel rings, they've gotten a lot of rings since they've been around.
Yeah, that'll be the 3rd one, and that's what I told them. I said this one is very, very important to them. It's one that they will wear every single day. It's one that will be with them, and they'll look down on it, and they'll remember every single moment that's extremely important to them, as well as those other 2 rings. And those other 2 rings that they have, I want them to feel good about Citadel football when they look at those 2 and their experiences with Citadel football. And you may not wear those every single day, but you'll probably look at them on your dresser every single day, as I've got about 5 or 6 of them that I look at every single day. And my class ring from Norwich means the world to me. I don't wear it every single day because it's a little bit gaudy and big and a little bit cumbersome. But to be honest with you, I remember my time up there at Norwich when I wear that ring, and I think that's what these guys will remember when they're here.
Approximately how many guys get their rings this weekend?
I believe we'll have about 9 or so. Okay. I think there's going to be about 9 or 10 or so.
That's a good group there. They'll be quite a memorable weekend, that's for sure. All right, we're going to dive a little bit more into the Mercer Bears when we come back from this next time out. We have a very short period of time left in the program today, only about 15 minutes to get the last few questions in for Coach Brent Thompson. This is the Coach Brent Thompson Radio Show, and it airs on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910 AM.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart, is one of those robots from another bank. We're training him to bank human.
Bart, why are you winding the clock back?
The clock stated 11:35 p.m., but they are still working.
The clock is fine. Our live customer service is available all night, and all day for that matter.
He's learning.
At TD Bank, we do things differently.
Hello?
Like live customer service.
Hello?
24/7. Don't just bank, bank human.
Since 2002, the lottery has helped award more than 1 million scholarships. So when you play, you're not just taking a chance. You're also giving one.
The great thing about an old truck is you can treat it like an old truck, which is exactly why you got a truck in the first place. It's not old, it's broken in. So keep it running longer, stronger, with quality parts and a whole lot of Napa know-how. That's not gonna buff out.
TD Bank's new intern, Bart.
We are back at Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown at 126 Williman Street for the Brent Thompson Radio Show. Last segment of the show for this week. We'll be back again next week, though, from 7 until 8. And this weekend, Bulldogs have Mercer in town to take on the Bears. That is a 2 o'clock ball game at Johnson Haygood Stadium on Parents Weekend and the Parents Day game. So Mercer, a little bit more about them. We've talked about them building the program and the infancy of the program, which is now over, obviously. Mercer is 2-3 on the year. They are 1-2 in the Southern Conference, which right now has them tied for 7th. They were picked 5th coming into the season. A win over Jacksonville to start off the season. That's not Jacksonville State. That's Jacksonville. And in week 2, heck of a ball game with Wofford. I'm sure you've watched a lot of their games. And it leads me to another question, and I'll get back to what they've done so far this year. Coach, every game tape doesn't necessarily yield a lot of great results for you guys. So of what Mercer has done so far this year, what tapes have been the ones that you've paid the most attention to?
Well, Jacksonville, first of all, is Jacksonville. They get in, they run a little bit of under center veer stuff. They get into some similar formations. Coach Shields, actually, he's the head coach there. He followed us at Lenoir Ryan. He's been a good friend of mine. He's worked at Army. I worked for him for 1 year at Bucknell. So he's got some similar concepts within his offense. I was able to watch some of that and get some idea of what they were doing. He does a little bit more shotgun principles now. And then of Wofford, you always watch Wofford. They get into some similar alignments. Their plays are a little bit different, but you can see at least how they're going to align to certain formations. And then we've had the last 3 years of film to watch on our own.
That's true. That's true. Now, about the Wofford game. That was a game where Mercer led 27-14 with 8:15 remaining in that game. Turnovers, unanswered points led to a loss to Wofford. They let that one get away, didn't they? Yeah, fairly typical of Wofford. They hang around, and it was just what they did to us last year in the playoff game. Very similar is all of a sudden as they find something and they exploit it, and it's no different than what we do. We probe and probe and probe until we find something that we like, and then you've got to exploit that, and that's kind of what happened to them. They gave up a couple of big plays, and of course I think they turned the ball over late in the game in their own end and created a short field for
for Wofford's offense to go. So once again, they could easily have defeated Wofford and been undefeated except for the loss to Auburn, which was very close.
They lost a fumble late in the game that led to a touchdown. They threw 2 interceptions late in the game. One of them didn't amount to points, but it did have a factor. And then the last one, of course, was an interception that iced the game because Wofford was in front. What about the Auburn game? You know, you look at some of these, and sometimes you don't get a whole lot out of the games where an FCS is playing an FBS, but judging from the score and judging by having watched a little of this game myself, I thought they put together a pretty good effort there.
They did a great job, especially on defense. I thought their defense played outstanding in that game. They played tough. They played physical. They ran to the football. They didn't give up too many big plays against a very talented Auburn team. I believe they're a top 10 team right now. So just a tremendous effort on their part. And one of those things where I think they're extremely good on defense, a little bit young on offense. And when you're playing a redshirt freshman quarterback, you don't know you don't know week to week, but he's getting much better. And I know he's improved every single week that he's been out there.
Auburn led 10-3 at halftime against Mercer and 17-3 after 3. The final score was 24-10. And then in week 4, a common opponent between the two of you, they went to ETSU just like you did. This game went to overtime, and ETSU was able to win that game 26-23. And so common opponents, I would think, are always interesting tapes to watch.
Yeah, they are. You can't put too much into it because you don't know what shows up every single week. Sometimes when you're playing on the road, that can be a little bit difficult. And that game went to overtime, and I was able to catch the overtime live when it was going on. And ETSU, they popped a big one on their first play, and Mercer had the ball first, and they had to kick the field goal. So it was one of those things where ETSU went out to win the game on the first play, and if they don't, they would have been 2nd and 10, but they tried a little bit of a pump and go, and they got them on the double move.
Last Saturday, Mercer was able to win quite handily against VMI and did so at home in Macon 49-14. How would you describe Mercer offensively?
Well, they try to be efficient. They got Leggett, who's kind of come along, and he's gotten more carries throughout the year. He's a transfer from Georgia Tech. Played B-back, a little bit of B-back at Georgia Tech. He's a Georgia kid. And I think he's a very good player. I think he's got great speed, and there's a reason why he was recruited by Georgia Tech and signed with Georgia Tech. The quarterback, who I think is a spectacular player, is a big, strong kid. He throws a great deep ball. He's got tremendous accuracy. But, he does have the quality of being a redshirt freshman yet, so he hasn't had all the game experience, as we know. Very, very talented up front. I think they do a good job. Their offensive line coach does a good job there. And they've got a great receiver that they find different ways to get Marquise Irvin the ball. He does a good job of being able to find ways to get him open, whether they throw it on a bubble screen or underneath. But like I said, they can get him on the deep ball as well.
Marquise Irvin was a second-team All-League selection last year, a preseason All-League selection this time around. And so Mercer is the opposition for the Citadel Bulldogs coming up this particular weekend. Defensive side of things, what are they trying to do to you there? What looks will you see?
Well, they play a 50 defense. They play a big nose guard in there. Dorian Kithcart played a little bit against us last year, was a true freshman. And I tell you what, he's a big load in there to move around. He moves extremely well. And anytime that you cover up the center, it's going to be a tough day. I think we've got a great center to be able to handle him, though. A little bit more experienced on that side of the ball. They've got some linebackers that have been around and have played for a while. They're starting a couple of new guys in the secondary and at the safety position. But really, for the most part, their guys up front are pretty stout and know what they're doing.
Last week, you saw a lot of 50 front. You had a guy on every one of your linemen. And so this week, if you see, seeing some of the same sorts of things, Samford wanted you to to try to get to the perimeter from time to time and try to chase you down. What does Mercer kind of tend to potentially give you?
They do a good job, and they mix it up. They try to give you different looks over top of your guard. They try to give you different looks over top of your tackles. They try to mix it up a little bit. Their field and their boundary calls. They try to bait you in going to the field sometimes, and then they do a pretty good job of stuffing you in the middle a little bit. So we've got to be technique sound, which I don't think we played with great technique or effort last weekend. So I said this week is we want to just focus on ourselves and focus on getting better. Technique and fundamentals.
I'll get some thoughts from you in the latter moments of the program here about some of the other games that are happening. You won't pay much attention to them perhaps, but You've got Samford coming off the victory against you. They're going to go to VMI, a team that has had its struggles this year.
Yeah, they certainly have. You know, I've caught them a couple times on film, and obviously seeing Samford, you know, live and in person, I think they're very, very talented. The quarterback, extremely talented, and they'll find open receivers, and I think they do a good job of being able to move the ball on anybody.
You had mentioned earlier about how good Western Carolina has been this year. They are ranked 22nd in the country, according to the poll that I kind of consider the official one. They're 2-0 in the league, and they're going to go to Wofford, the 5th-ranked team in the country. So we've got a battle between two teams right now, anyway, that after a couple of games are sitting in first place.
Very interesting because Western Carolina's got a lot of option principles, and watching them in the Samford game, they've got a lot of option principles which you would say would fall into Wofford's hands. You know, Wofford goes against the option in their defense. I think they do a great job against us. That'll be interesting to see because Wofford, I think, has got an excellent defense. It'll be interesting to see what kind of defense Western has. I haven't seen them on defense yet, nor have I seen Wofford on defense too much. I've mostly been watching kind of the Western offense because just out of intrigue of the option.
Western has Detrez Newsome, perhaps the best back in the league. He certainly leads the league in rushing right now anyway. And gets about 139 yards per ball game so far. Your team sitting in a circumstance where you still lead the league in rushing at 333.5. Outside the league, one team has to do it every week, and at 3:30 on Saturday, Robert Morris is at ETSU. They're back at home again where they seem to be pretty stout.
Yeah, I don't know about this Robert Morris team. Of course, I know they're from Pennsylvania, and I know just kind of I've seen them. I've seen their scores pop up every now and again. It's an interesting ball game right there. It's being an out-of-conference game. I don't know what kind of athletes Robert Morris has. ETSU, I do know that they're well coached and that they play good defense and that they'll be able to, find some open receivers there.
Last thing, Furman is at Chattanooga this weekend. Chattanooga? How much have you seen of them on tape?
I haven't seen any of them. We haven't crossed over at all with either one of these two teams, just based upon the scores. Based upon what I've seen, pop up as far as Furman goes, it's been their offense has exploded the last couple of weeks. They may have found their groove, and that's kind of what my biggest fear was when you face those guys late with a new coach. They could be hitting their groove offensively, and I know Coach Staggs on defense does a great job. Chattanooga's been kind of a little bit of a surprise this year. Had some good days, had a great day against VMI, and then probably not so good day in their mind against Western Carolina offensively.
Good to visit about some of the games that are happening this week in the league. Those are the 4 games in addition to the Citadel and Mercer. Coming up this weekend, it will be the 17th-ranked Citadel Bulldogs against the unranked Mercer Bears coming up on Saturday, 2 o'clock. Thoughts about and emphasis, even if you've kind of talked about it or brushed past it, with this game on Saturday? What are the things that you felt like, I got to make sure my guys get this week?
Well, I had to really impart on them the fact that we've got another opportunity here. We need to display Citadel football. We need to get back to doing what we're doing. We need to be physical. If you watch us against Samford, I don't think that we were our typical selves on defense. We weren't forcing any pressure anywhere. We weren't forcing him to get the ball out of his hands. We didn't keep him in front of him. All those things that we needed to do, we didn't do. Same thing on offense. I don't think that we got 3 and 4 yards per carry. We weren't able to establish a fullback, and that's what hurt us is we weren't able to stay on sides. Even the penalties, absolutely. I think we had 10 or 12 penalties last week. Those are the emphasis things. We focused more on ourselves rather than Mercer. If we go out there and we play the way that Citadel football is capable of playing, we have a good chance to win. And if we don't, and we played like we played last week, we won't have a chance to win. We're not as talented as mostly everybody in the league. But when we play together and we play offense and defensive football the way that we're supposed to, we have a pretty good chance of winning the game.
And what have you seen in your guys' eyes after you've imparted those messages? They look like that message is received?
Yesterday was probably one of the best Tuesday practices we've had in a long time, and I was impressed with it. Today we were just in shells, but we moved around and we moved with some authority in there. I love the way that Dominique was running the team today. I thought he did a great job of getting the team going. We got a lot of plays in. And then on the defensive side, Miles Pierce is stepping up as a leader and controlling that side of the ball. So I'm excited to see us play on Saturday.
Thank you very much, Coach. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Mike.
That is Brent Thompson, the head coach of the Citadel Bulldogs, and this has been the Brent Thompson Radio Show from Fiery Ron's Home Team Barbecue downtown. We're at 126 Williman Street, so hope you'll come and see us at a future show as we're here each and every Wednesday night. Mark Romness was our producer this evening, and we thank him, and we thank everybody for listening and being a part of the Head Coach Brent Thompson radio show on ESPN Radio 94.7 FM and 910.